We're here with Michael Barone with the Washington Examiner. He's an experienced political commentator, and we're going to ask him about the important issues in this campaign and political theory in general.
Well, I think we've got some very important issues in this campaign of an unusual nature. We haven't had as big a shift from one party to the other in the House popular vote. It's a good metric of support for the parties since the mid-'90s. We haven't had as that big a change in the House popular vote as we had between 2008 and 2010 since the elections of 1946 and 48. And at issue then and at issue now were proposals by Democratic Party, back then Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, now Barack Obama, to vastly increase the size and scope of government. And in the end result of the 1946-48 elections, although the Democrats lost control of Congress for only 2 years then, was that we rejected the idea of having a European-style welfare state. We went the opposite direction that Britain went when the Labour Party won in 1945, about the same post-war period. Today, the real question raised, and it's being raised specifically by Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, is whether or not we should turn back the increases in the size and scope of government that Barack Obama and the Democratic supermajorities in 2009 and 2010 voted for, and reject proposals to go even farther in that direction. Or should we continue on this course and for a horizon where we're spending a much higher percentage of gross domestic product on government than we have in the peacetime past? So it's a pretty fundamental issue.
So it's gone from approximately an average of 20% of GDP for government spending to now 24, 25%. That makes a big difference, right?
Well, that makes a huge difference because obviously, even in World War II, we went up to 45%, 40 to 45% of government GDP. There was a total war on. Right. Obviously, that's a different situation. But when you're looking at peacetime, no, this is unprecedented level of support for government. And the problem is we're only going to get about 16% of GDP in revenues at the present time. And there's a lot of evidence, which the Republicans are citing, that the size and scope of government is deterring people from investing, deterring people from creating jobs, deterring people from doing things that would stimulate the economy to grow and produce more in the way of revenue.
So which candidate wants to redistribute more wealth?
Well, the Democrats, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, want to redistribute more wealth. And there's a problem in doing so. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher once said the problem with socialism is that sooner or later you run out of other people's money. And if you start redistributing wealth, people stop creating it. And you don't have as much wealth to redistribute, and you got a big problem. If you want to see what it looks like, go to Greece.
I've asked this question of many journalists, and many of them say that redistribution of wealth is a loaded term. And I really can't understand. They don't really explain why they say it's loaded. I say, is the government actually redistributing wealth or not? And why is that a loaded term?
Well, we have redistribution of wealth to some extent through the operation of the tax system and the benefit system that we have in place even before Barack Obama. I mean, under George W. Bush, after the so-called Bush tax cuts, you still had the upper 1% of the income stream as measured on their income tax returns, providing 40% of the income tax revenue to the federal government. And the top 20% are providing about, as I recall, the figure somewhere of the magnitude of 80%.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the government should redistribute its citizens' wealth?
Well, I think as a matter of practice, we're not going to get out of redistribution entirely as long as we have any element of progressive taxation, that is higher tax rates on higher earners. And if you have programs for, recompensing people for unemployment compensation, if you have disability insurance, which we do as part of the Social Security system, yes, there's going to be some redistribution. The argument is about the degree, and this Obama administration has increased the degree of redistribution to a substantial extent unparalleled in our peacetime history.
So how does that affect the economy when the government is consuming so much of the production of wealth and, like we said before, 25%?
Well, how is it affecting the economy? The simple answer is look around. Obviously, this is clearly the slowest recovery from a recession that we've had since the economists started measuring recessions in the 1930s. So something is retarding growth.
So you're really against redistribution of wealth. You think it's a mistake?
I think that you can carry redistribution of wealth too far. I think the status quo that we had prior to Mr. Obama's election was considerably preferable to the status quo today.
Are you against farm subsidies?
Oh, gosh, I could go down a whole laundry list of federal programs that I'm against.
Please do.
No. Well, it's interesting. I've talked to former directors of the Office of Management and Budget in both administrations, in both Democratic and Republican administrations. And one of the things they tell me, although some of my conservative friends don't want to believe it, is that the government bureaucrats, the professional career employees in the Department of Office of Management and Budget, are actually very highly talented professionals. And if you want to know where waste, fraud, and abuse is, just ask them for the desk drawer that they keep the list of waste, fraud, and abuse programs. They know where they are. And administrations of both parties sometimes propose cutting these things, and they're seldom successful. And you know why? Because there's somebody in Congress, usually a Democrat, but often a Republican too, that wants those programs in there. It's my program, I sponsored it, we're going to stop this or that and so forth, and they don't want them out. So this is, my friend Jonathan Rauch wrote a book called Demosclerosis, where he said, absent a crisis in society, you don't get a chance to clear them out. I'll just conclude this interview by saying that I was just talking to the British European Parliament member Daniel Hannan, who is here in Tampa, and he was decrying the failure of the conservative Lib Dem coalition government in Britain, led by Prime Minister David Cameron, Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, Chancellor of the Exchequer George Osborne, and Cameron and Osborne are friends of his. He says, look, they didn't make enough cuts immediately. They had a moment, a sort of January 1st moment when they came in the election of May 2010. They could have cut a lot deeper, and they've lost the opportunity to do that. The supposedly right-wing nations of Canada and Sweden in the 1990s cut spending very substantially, and you know what?
They had a great result, right?
Well, yeah, their economies actually weathered this recession of financial, much better than most advanced countries, and there's not a lot of people starving in the streets in Canada and Sweden if you go over there. So thanks for the info.
Can I ask you a couple of questions about your general view of government? Because you have given us an excellent background and historical context for all these decisions, but I'd like to see if we can apply it, get a little bit on the...
No, I'm not going to give you philosophy.
Well, I just want to know, for example, do you think that the government should protect peaceful citizens against people that want to use force to take their money?
Well, sure. The government's there to provide a network of law within which citizens can operate. It needs to enforce contracts, have methods to redress torts, and to, it has to do something about currency. We hear some arguments at the Republican convention about just what that should be. Government has many legitimate functions. I think government can be... George Will wrote a book 30 years ago called Soulcraft. It could be soulcraft as well as statecraft. You can have government policies that encourage upwardly mobile behavior, government policies that encourage behaviors in which people can earn success. It's too complicated.
Let me ask you a question. Just one quick question here. So when the government forcefully takes money from some citizens through taxes in order to provide goods and services for others in what they do in redistribution of wealth, are they protecting the taxpayers when they do that?
Well, you have to ask the voters. The government inherently involves a monopoly of force. We don't want individuals going around killing murderers.
Right, but are they, when they do that, is that a protection of these taxpayers, or are they actually victimizing the taxpayers when they forcefully take their money and give it to other people for free goods and services?
That's what we're arguing about in this election.
Okay, well, what's your view?
My view is closer to the Republicans than the Democrats.
So you think that they aren't protecting them? So really, there's a contradiction there, really, right?
It's a matter of degree and a subject for argument and litigation. And this is not the last time we're going to litigate those questions in the political marketplace.
Well, thank you for your wisdom on the subject and your historical analysis.
Okay, I got to run.
Bye.
Thanks.